I'm Lori, 32 female. I live in a small, one-bedroom apartment that smells like paint and fresh coffee, a space I've been trying to convince myself is a sanctuary and not a holding cell. As a freelance graphic designer, my days are spent creating clean, perfect logos for other people's bright new futures, a bitter irony that isn't lost on me. Just 6 months ago, my own future looked entirely different, but a swift and brutal divorce left me packing up a decade of my life into cardboard boxes now stacked in my parents' garage. This story isn't about my divorce, not really, but it's about what happens when you're at your lowest, and the person you should be able to trust the most decides to start digging you a deeper hole. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The divorce was like a controlled demolition. From the outside, it looked neat. We signed the papers, divided the assets, and shook hands. My ex-husband, Tom, kept the house we had bought together, the one with the garden I'd spent 5 years nurturing. I got my car, half of our savings, and a profound sense of failure that clung to me like damp laundry. The biggest logistical problem was my stuff. Not just clothes and books, but the accumulated possessions of a life I thought was permanent. Furniture that wouldn't fit in my tiny new apartment, boxes of sentimental items from my childhood, and, most importantly, my collection of jewelry. A mix of costume pieces and precious family heirlooms I'd inherited. There was simply no room. My parents, Mark and Helen, were saints. "Of course, you can store it here, sweetheart," my mom had said, her voice soft with a pity that made my skin crawl. "Take as long as you need." My dad, a retired history teacher who saw life in neat, chronological chapters, helped me unload the U-Haul into their pristine garage and the spare room, which had once been my childhood bedroom. It was a space frozen in time, with faded posters of bands I no longer listened to and a bookshelf filled with teenage angst. Now, it was a mausoleum for my failed marriage. Among the boxes was one labeled jewelry important. Inside, nestled in velvet-lined boxes and soft pouches, were pieces that told the story of the women in my family. My great-aunt's Art Deco earrings, a sapphire ring my father gave my mother on their 10th anniversary, which she later passed to me, and the centerpiece, my grandmother's locket. It was a simple, oval-shaped gold locket, worn smooth with time. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of her and my grandfather on their wedding day. She had given it to me on my 16th birthday, her hands trembling as she fastened it around my neck. "Family is your anchor, Lori," she'd whispered. "Never forget that." I rarely wore it, terrified of losing it, but I would take it out on difficult days just to hold it, to feel the weight of its history in my palm. My younger sister, Jenna, had been conspicuously absent during my move. She lived about an hour away, working as a consultant at a high-end boutique where she advised wealthy women on which $4,000 handbag best matched their shoes. Her life was a curated feed of luxury, a stark contrast to my own implosion. When she did finally show up at my parents' house a week later, she breezed in with a gust of expensive perfume and performative sympathy. "Lori, oh my God, you poor thing," she'd cooed, giving me an awkward, one-armed hug. "But this new apartment is a fresh start, right? Think of it as, like, a minimalist rebirth." She walked through my old bedroom, her eyes scanning the stacks of boxes with a strange intensity. "Wow, you really have a lot of stuff," she commented, nudging a box labeled winter clothes with the toe of her designer boot. "Are you sure you need all this? Maybe it's time to declutter. Marie Kondo your life, you know?" I was too exhausted to argue, so I just shrugged. "I'll sort through it eventually," I mumbled. "I just don't have the energy right now." "Well, if you need any help selling stuff, let me know," she offered, a little too brightly. "I'm amazing at it. I know all the best resale sites." At the time, I thought it was a genuine, if slightly tactless, offer. I thanked her and didn't think another thing of it. In the weeks that followed, I tried to build a new routine. I threw myself into my work, taking on extra projects to keep my mind busy and my bank account from dwindling. I saw my best friend, Sarah, for cheap dinners where we'd complain about the world, and I'd try not to cry into my tacos. I visited my parents every Sunday for dinner, During those visits, I'd sometimes see Jenna's car in the driveway. She was stopping by more often than she ever had before. "It's so nice that Jenna is checking in on us so much," my mom would say, pleased. ITH. Your situation has made her realize how important family is. Jenna would usually be in my old room when I arrived, the door slightly ajar. When I'd ask what she was doing, she'd have a ready excuse. "Oh, I was just looking for my old yearbook," or "Mom asked me to find that old board game we used to play." She was always so cheerful, so helpful. She'd bring our parents little gifts, a scented candle for Mom, a new book for Dad. She was the perfect, caring daughter. I, on the other hand, was the sad, divorced daughter who brought nothing but my laundry and a heavy cloud of melancholy. My parents, bless them, were just happy to have one of their children seemingly thriving. They didn't see the way her eyes lingered on my things, the way she handled the lid of a box with a proprietary air. I didn't see it either, not then. I was too lost in my own fog of grief to notice the fox that had slipped into the henhouse, disguised as a concerned sister. The first hint that something was wrong was subtle. I went to the garage one day to find a specific sweater, a cashmere turtleneck that felt like a hug. I couldn't find it in the box I was sure I'd put it in. I figured I had just misplaced it and made a mental note to do a proper inventory soon. But soon became a vague concept, a task for a future, more capable version of myself. I was living in survival mode, and a missing sweater felt like a trivial loss in the grand scheme of things. It was just the first thread, a single, almost invisible pull that would eventually unravel everything. The initial feeling was less of an alarm and more of a quiet, nagging hum of confusion. It was like living in a house where a ghost was slowly moving your keys. You'd question your own memory before you'd ever suspect an intruder. After the cashmere sweater vanished, other small things followed. A pair of designer jeans I'd splurged on years ago, a silk blouse I'd saved for special occasions. Each time, I'd rummage through the neatly labeled boxes in my parents' garage, a knot of frustration tightening in my stomach. I'd unpack and repack an entire box, convinced I was just being disorganized. I'd blame divorce brain, a term my therapist used to describe the forgetfulness and mental fog that follows major emotional trauma. It was a convenient explanation, and for a while, I clung to it. The items were never significant enough to cause a major panic. They were things I could, theoretically, live without. But they were my things, pieces of a life I was already grieving. The disappearances felt like tiny aftershocks from the earthquake that had leveled my marriage. During my Sunday visits, I'd mention it offhandedly to my mom. "I swear I had a blue dress in that box," I'd say, pointing towards the spare room. "I can't find it anywhere." My mom, Helen, ever the pragmatist, would offer a simple solution. "Oh, honey, you have so much stuff packed away. You probably just put it in a different box. When you have time to properly organize, I'm sure it'll turn up." It was a reasonable explanation, one I told myself was true. Jenna, if she was there, would chime in with a supportive but dismissive tone. "You should really let me help you sell some of this, Laurie," she'd say, sipping her tea. "A fresh start means letting go of the old. It would probably be like super therapeutic." Her offers of help felt less like kindness and more like a sales pitch. She never offered to help me look for the missing items, only to help me get rid of what was left. Still, the idea that my own sister could be stealing from me was so unthinkable that it never once crossed my mind. Sisters fight over borrowed clothes, sure, that was normal. But this was different. The items weren't being borrowed, they were vanishing into thin air. One afternoon, I decided to tackle the jewelry box. I needed to get it appraised for insurance purposes, a boring but necessary task of my new, single life. I hauled the heavy wooden case from the closet in my old bedroom to the floor and opened it. The top tray looked fine, costume jewelry, silver chains, nothing of significant value. But as I lifted the tray to get to the velvet pouches below, a cold dread trickled down my spine. The pouch where I kept my Great Aunt's Art Deco earrings was empty. My heart started to pound. I frantically dug through the rest of the box. The sapphire ring was gone. I searched every pouch, every small compartment, my breath catching in my throat. Then I reached for the small, silk-wrapped parcel that held my grandmother's locket. It wasn't there. Panic, sharp and acidic, rose in my chest. This wasn't a misplaced sweater. This was a violation. These were irreplaceable pieces of my history, of my family's history. I tore the bedroom apart, yanking boxes open, strewing clothes and books across the floor in a desperate, chaotic search. It was no use. They were gone. I stumbled out of the room, wild-eyed, and found my mom in the kitchen. "Mom, the jewelry is gone," I cried, my voice shaking. "Grandma's locket, the sapphire ring, they're not there." My mom rushed over, her face etched with concern. "Lori, calm down. Are you sure? Where did you last see them?" "I'm sure. They were in the box, in their pouches. I packed them myself." We went back to the room and searched together, my mom's initial calm slowly giving way to a worried frown. "I don't understand," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Who could have taken them? No one comes in here but family." My dad came in, drawn by the commotion. A retired teacher, he approached the problem methodically. "Let's retrace our steps," he said. "When was the last time you saw them for certain, Lori?" I had to think back. "When I packed them right before I moved out of the house, 6 months ago." "Could they have been lost in the move?" he asked gently. "No," I said, shaking my head fiercely. "I packed that box myself and watched the movers put it in the U-Haul. I unpacked it here myself. It's been in that closet ever since." The three of us sat in silence for a moment, the unspoken question hanging in the air. The only other person who had a key to the house, the only other person who had been in and out of that room frequently over the past few months, was Jenna. But to voice that suspicion felt like a betrayal in itself. It felt monstrous. "Maybe you should call Jenna," my mom suggested, her voice barely a whisper. "Just to ask, maybe she borrowed something?" The word borrowed felt laughably inadequate. "You borrow a sweater. You don't borrow a dead grandmother's locket." I called her, my hand trembling as I held the phone. She answered on the third ring, her voice bubbly and distant. "Hey, sis, what's up?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "Jenna, have you been in my room at Mom and Dad's? I'm missing some things, some really important jewelry." There was a slight pause on her end. "What? No, why would I go through your stuff? I was in there to find my old tennis racket last week, but I didn't touch any of your boxes." Her denial was swift and smooth. It was too smooth. There was no surprise in her voice, no concern, just a flat, rehearsed-sounding denial. "Are you sure?" I pressed. "My grandmother's locket is gone, Jenna." "Wow, that's awful," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "You should probably call the police, Lori." Maybe there was a break-in. A break-in. A break-in where the thief ignored the flat-screen TV downstairs and went straight for a specific box of heirlooms in a back bedroom, taking only a few key pieces. It was absurd. After I hung up, a sick feeling settled in my stomach. I knew she was lying. I didn't have proof, but I felt it in my bones. My parents, however, were desperate to believe the best of their daughter. "She sounded very convincing," my dad said, though his eyes were full of doubt. "Jenna wouldn't do that," my mom insisted, her denial more for her own benefit than mine. "She wouldn't. There has to be another explanation." They wanted another explanation because the alternative was too ugly to contemplate, that one of their daughters was preying on the other's vulnerability, stealing and selling pieces of their own family history for profit. That night, I went back to my apartment and sat in the dark, the silence amplifying the echo of my sister's lie. The empty space in my jewelry box was a black hole, pulling all the warmth and trust I had left for my family into it. I knew I hadn't lost my mind. I was being robbed, slowly and methodically, by my own sister. And I had absolutely no idea how to prove it. The weeks following the discovery of the missing jewelry were a special kind of hell. I existed in a state of suspended disbelief, caught between the certainty of my gut and the complete lack of concrete evidence. I filed a police report, as Jenna had so helpfully suggested. The officer who took my statement was polite, but dismissive, his eyes glazing over as I described the sentimental value of the items. "It's most likely a targeted theft by someone you know," he stated, handing me a case number. "Unfortunately, without any signs of forced entry or witnesses, there's not much we can do. Check local pawn shops, online marketplaces. Let us know if you find anything." It was a dead end, and I knew it. The police weren't going to solve this. My relationship with my parents became strained. We avoided talking about the theft, the topic hovering over our Sunday dinners like a toxic cloud. They so desperately wanted to believe Jenna that they started to subtly question my own memory. "Are you absolutely positive you didn't put it in a safety deposit box, Lori?" my mom asked one evening. "You were under so much stress during the move." The implication was clear. It was more plausible that I had forgotten what I'd done with priceless heirlooms than it was that Jenna had stolen them. It was easier for them to believe their grieving daughter was Kanfu said than to believe their other daughter was a thief. I felt like I was losing my mind, my reality being gaslighted by the very people who were supposed to be my anchor. My friendship with Sarah was my only solace. She was the one person who believed me without hesitation. We'd sit in her cozy living room, her cat purring on my lap as I went over the details again and again. "She's a leech, Lori," Sarah said, her voice filled with a protective fury. "She saw you were down, and she saw an opportunity. People like that, they don't have a conscience." Sarah, with her background as a vet tech, had a very black and white view of the world. She saw predators and prey, and to her, Jenna was a predator in pastel-colored cashmere. I started obsessively scrolling through online resale sites, my eyes burning from staring at the screen for hours. I searched for vintage gold locket, Art Deco earrings, and sapphire gold ring. The sheer volume of listings was overwhelming. Thousands of pieces of jewelry, thousands of stories, all reduced to a price and a shipping fee. I found dozens of lockets that were similar to my grandmother's, but none were a perfect match. The clasp was different, the engraving on the back was missing. It was a hopeless task, like trying to find a single grain of sand on an endless beach. The frustration was eating me alive, making me irritable and paranoid. I started to doubt myself, just as my parents did. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I had lost them. Maybe the trauma of the divorce had finally cracked something inside me. Then, on a dreary Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I was on a crowded city bus heading home from a client meeting. The bus lurched to a stop, and I looked up from my phone, my gaze sweeping absently across the other passengers. And then I saw it. It was hanging around the neck of a young woman sitting a few seats ahead of me. A simple, oval-shaped gold locket, worn smooth with time. My breath hitched in my chest. It couldn't be. It was just a coincidence. There must be thousands of lockets like that in the world, but I couldn't look away. My eyes were glued to the little piece of metal, rising and fall with the woman's breathing. She had headphones on, oblivious to my frantic staring. She turned her head to look out the window, and the locket swung slightly, catching the light. I saw the clasp. It was a small, delicate filigree clasp, one that my grandfather, a jeweler by trade, had custom-made for my grandmother after the original one broke. It was unique. It was hers, it was mine. A wave of nausea washed over me. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. It felt like I was seeing a ghost. My grandmother's memory, her love, everything that locket represented, was hanging around the neck of a complete stranger on a city bus. The world narrowed to that single point of gold. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal, protective instinct. I had to get it back. My stop was approaching, but I couldn't move. What was I supposed to do? Confront her, accuse a random woman of possessing my stolen property? She would think I was insane. The bus slowed for her stop. She stood up, gathering her bag. It was now or never. I scrambled to my feet, my bag bumping against the person next to me. "Excuse me," I mumbled, pushing my way through the aisle. I had to be careful. I had to be smart. I got off the bus right behind her. My mind was racing. I followed her at a safe distance as she walked down the street, my hands shaking. I pulled out my phone and pretended to be texting, trying to look casual. She walked for 2 blocks and then turned into a small coffee shop. This was my chance. I took a deep breath and followed her inside. She was ordering at the counter. I stood behind her in line, my pulse roaring in my ears. I needed a closer look, definitive proof. When she turned away from the counter with her coffee, I accidentally bumped into her, jostling her arm. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry," I exclaimed, my voice higher than usual. "I am so clumsy." "It's okay, no problem," she said, smiling kindly. Her smile made it even worse. She seemed like a nice person. But my eyes were locked on the locket. Up close, there was no doubt. I could see the faint, barely there scratch near the clasp, a mark I'd made as a child while playing with it. "That's a beautiful necklace," I said, trying to sound conversational. She touched it instinctively. "Oh, thank you," she said. "It's vintage. I bought it online a few weeks ago. I just fell in love with it." The words hit me like a physical blow. Bought it online. My sister's voice echoed in my head. I know all the best resale sites. The proof I had been so desperately searching for was right in front of me, presented by a kind stranger in a coffee shop. "Would you mind if I asked which site you bought it from?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm looking for a gift for my mother, and that's exactly her." "Style? Of course," she said, happy to help. "It was from a seller on this app called Gem Collective. Her shop is called Chloe's Closet. She has amazing taste." Chloe's Closet. My sister's middle name was Chloe, a name she'd always hated until now, apparently. It was her. It was Jenna. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a sickening finality. The fog of doubt and confusion that had clouded my mind for weeks evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. And with that certainty came a new feeling, one that pushed aside the grief and the pain. It was rage, a pure, clarifying rage. My sister had stolen my past, and now I was going to systematically dismantle her future. The hunt was over. The war was just beginning. Sitting in that coffee shop, my own latte completely forgotten, I felt a strange calm descend over me. The rage was still there, a white-hot coal in my stomach, but my mind was suddenly sharp and clear. The woman with my locket had given me the key, Chloe's Closet, on an app called Gem Collective. I downloaded it before she had even left the shop. My hands were steady as I typed my sister's secret shop name into the search bar, and there it was. The logo was a chic, minimalist design, a stylized CC that I recognized as one of Jenna's own doodles. The banner image was a professionally lit shot of blush pink silk and scattered pearls. The shop's tagline read, "Curated vintage and pre-loved treasures for the modern muse." It was nauseatingly on brand for her. The first few listings were for things I didn't recognize: designer handbags, silk scarves, trendy sunglasses. These were likely items from her own closet, used to build a legitimate-looking storefront. But as I scrolled down, my blood ran cold. There it was, listed under sold items, a listing titled Exquisite Gold-Filled Vintage Locket. The pictures were sharp and clear, taken against a white marble background. Jenna had photographed every angle, including the custom filigree clasp. The description was a masterpiece of flowery nonsense, a timeless piece whispering tales of a bygone era, perfect for the romantic soul, one of a kind. She had sold my grandmother's memory for $250. I scrolled further. A wave of sickness and fury washed over me as I saw more of my life, itemized and priced for strangers. There was the listing for the sapphire ring, described as a stunning sapphire and gold statement ring, royal vibes. It had sold for $400. My great-aunt's Art Deco earrings, now called Gatsby-era crystal fan earrings, had gone for $150. Then came the clothes. My cashmere turtleneck, my silk blouse, the designer jeans. Each one was there in the sold section, modeled not by Jenna, but on a mannequin, making them look anonymous and generic. She was smart. She hadn't used her own name, and she hadn't shown her face. To any random buyer, it was just another chic resale shop. But to me, it was a catalog of her betrayal. I spent the next 2 days glued to my laptop, my graphic design work completely forgotten. I was a detective now, and my sister's digital life was my crime scene. I took screenshots of everything: her Gem Collective shop, every sold listing that I recognized, the shop's policies. I cross-referenced the shop's username, Chloe's Closet, on other platforms. I found her on Poshmark and Depop, using slight variations of the same name. She had built a small empire on my belongings. The comments and reviews were glowing. "Super fast shipping. Item is even more beautiful in person. A+++ seller." Each positive review felt like a tiny stab to the heart. These strangers were praising my sister for her efficiency in selling off my life. My best friend, Sarah, came over that evening with pizza and a grimly determined look on her face. I had called her from the coffee shop, my voice a tight, shaking whisper, and she had just said, "I'm on my way, don't do anything until I get there." I laid out my laptop on the coffee table, showing her the gallery of stolen memories. She looked at the screen, her expression hardening with each swipe. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just put a hand on my shoulder. "Okay," she said, her voice low and even. "So this is what we're dealing with, a sociopath with an online boutique." Sarah's practicality was exactly what I needed. She helped me organize the evidence. We created a detailed spreadsheet. In one column, we listed the stolen item. In the next, we pasted the screenshot of the sold listing. In the third, we noted the sale price. We even found a cached version of a listing for a pearl necklace my ex-husband had given me. Jenna had described it as a classic pearl strand perfect for a bride-to-be. The audacity was breathtaking. As we worked, a plan began to form in my mind, shifting from a vague desire for revenge into something more concrete and tactical. Simply confronting her wasn't enough. She would lie, just as she had on the phone. She would deny everything, and see me as the crazy, emotional, divorced sister. Our parents would want to believe her, and without irrefutable proof tying Jenna, not just Chloe's closet, to the sales, it would be my word against hers. A public accusation would just tear the family apart and leave me looking unhinged. No, I needed to do something that she couldn't deny. I needed to expose her in a way that was both personally devastating for her and legally airtight for me. "What are you thinking, Lori?" Sarah asked, watching me. Your face just went from victim to supervillain. "I'm a graphic designer, right?" I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. "I create brands. I tell stories through images. Jenna thinks she's created this chic, sophisticated brand for herself online. I'm going to use my skills to take it apart, piece by piece, in front of everyone she cares about." The idea was to create a trap, a digital Trojan horse. I would use my design skills to create something that looked like an opportunity for her, something that would appeal to her vanity and her greed. It would be a lure that she wouldn't be able to resist, and when she took the bait, I would have all the proof I needed, delivered by her own hand. "First things first," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "I need to know exactly what's left. I'm going to my parents' house tomorrow." Sarah nodded. "Want backup?" "No," I said firmly. "I need to do this part alone." The next morning, I drove to my parents' house while they were out at their weekly grocery run. I let myself in with my key and went straight to my old bedroom. Armed with my spreadsheet, I began a meticulous inventory. I opened every box, checked every drawer, and documented every single missing item. The list grew longer and longer. A leather jacket, a pair of vintage boots, a signed first edition book. The scope of her theft was staggering. She had been systematically looting my life for 6 months. At the bottom of the last box of clothes, I found a small, embroidered purse that my grandmother had made. As I picked it up, a piece of paper fell out. It was a receipt from a local consignment store, dated 3 months prior. On it was a list of items: 1 women's cashmere sweater, 1 pair designer jeans. The total payout was a measly $75. This was the final piece of the puzzle. She wasn't just selling online. She was offloading the less trendy items for quick cash locally. She was sloppy. She had left a paper trail. I carefully placed the receipt in my bag. It was the first physical piece of evidence I had. Standing there, in the wreckage of my childhood room, surrounded by the ghosts of my stolen possessions, I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt an electrifying sense of purpose. Jenna had underestimated me. She saw me as a heartbroken, pathetic victim. She had no idea I was about to become the architect of her downfall. The plan came together over the next week, meticulously crafted during late nights fueled by coffee and a cold, burning sense of justice. My apartment transformed into a command center. Whiteboards were covered in flowcharts, my laptop hummed with design software, and Sarah acted as my trusted strategist and moral compass. The core of the plan was to exploit Jenna's 2 greatest weaknesses, her vanity and her greed. She had built her online persona, Chloe's Closet, as a curator of taste and luxury. I was going to offer her a chance to elevate that brand to a level she had only dreamed of, a chance she would be too arrogant to question. First, I created a fake identity. I became Elena Petrova, a fictional brand strategist and PR consultant from New York. I built an entire online presence for Elena. I bought a domain name and designed a sleek, professional website for Petrova PR, complete with a portfolio of fake high-end clients. I created a LinkedIn profile for Elena, connecting with hundreds of people in the fashion and marketing industries to make it look legitimate. I even created a sophisticated Instagram account for Petrova PR, populating it with generic but stylish content about brand elevation and market disruption. To anyone looking, Elena Petrova was a real, successful, and well-connected professional. Next, I needed to create the bait. I designed a fake, emerging designer grant from a prestigious and entirely fictional fashion incubator called the Vanguard Collective. The prize was a feature in a major fashion magazine, a professional photo shoot, and a $10,000 grant to expand the winner's business. The application process required the nominee to submit a detailed inventory of their current stock, along with proof of sourcing for their most unique, vintage pieces to ensure authenticity. This was the linchpin of the entire trap. To apply, Jenna would have to willingly provide me with a list of the stolen goods she still had in her possession. With the trap built, it was time to spring it. I needed a way to get the Vanguard Collective on G.N.'s radar without it seeming like it came from me. I knew Jenna followed dozens of mid-tier fashion influencers, aspiring to be one of them. I spent hours researching them until I found the perfect one, a woman named Tiffany whose content was all about supporting small, female-owned businesses. Using my fake Elena Petrova persona, I reached out to Tiffany. I crafted a professional email, introducing myself as a consultant for the Vanguard Collective and explaining our mission to find and elevate undiscovered talent in the online resale market. I told her we were incredibly impressed with her eye and her advocacy for small businesses. I then leaked the news of our grant to her, asking if she would be willing to share it with her followers as an exclusive announcement. To sweeten the deal, I offered her a consulting fee of $500 via PayPal, sent from a generic business account I had set up. It worked perfectly. People like Tiffany are always hungry for exclusive content that makes them look like industry insiders. 2 days later, she posted a glowing series of stories about the Vanguard Collective grant. OMG, you guys, I have the most amazing opportunity to share with you all, she gushed to her 50,000 followers. The Vanguard Collective is looking for the next big thing in vintage resale. This is a life-changing grant. I'm tagging a few of my favorite shops that I think should totally apply. And then, at the top of her list, she tagged at Chloe's Closet. I watched from the sidelines as Jenna took the bait. A few hours after Tiffany's post, Jenna shared it to her own story with the caption, "OMG, so honored to be noticed by Tiffany Styles. This is incredible, manifesting this." My heart pounded as I watched her digital breadcrumbs. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for her to walk into it. The waiting was the hardest part. For 3 days, there was nothing. I started to worry that she had gotten suspicious, that it was too good to be true. Sarah had to talk me down from a ledge of anxiety. "Patience, Lori," she said calmly. "A predator always circles its prey before it pounces. She's savoring this." Then, on the 4th day, the email arrived in the inbox I had created for the Vanguard Collective. The subject line was, "Application for the Emerging Designer Grant, Chloe's Closet." My hands trembled as I opened it. It was from Jenna. The email was gushing and overly professional, filled with corporate buzzwords she had probably learned from a podcast. "Dear Vanguard Collective Selection Committee," it began, "I am writing with immense excitement to submit my brand, Chloe's Closet, for your prestigious grant." She went on for 3 paragraphs about her passion for sustainable fashion and her unique curatorial vision. It was a work of pure fiction. But the attachments were pure fact. There were 2 of them. The first was a PDF of her application form where she had filled out all her personal details, her full name, Jenna Miller, her address, her phone number. She had officially and legally tied herself to the Chloe's Closet brand. The second attachment was a meticulously organized spreadsheet titled Chloe's Closet, Current Inventory and Sourcing. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked it open. It was a list of over 50 items. There were the vintage boots, the leather jacket, the signed first edition book, and next to each item, in a column labeled Source Provenance, she had written the most audacious lies. The leather jacket was sourced from an estate sale in the Hamptons. The vintage boots were a lucky find at a Parisian flea market. She had invented a glamorous history for each of my stolen possessions. She had done it. She had willingly, eagerly handed me a signed confession. She had provided a detailed, itemized list of the stolen property she still possessed, linking it directly to her real name and address. She had documented her own crime with the thoroughness of an accountant. I saved the files to 3 separate hard drives and printed out a hard copy. I now had everything I needed. The trap had not only worked, it had yielded more than I had ever hoped for. Now all that was left was the confrontation. But it wouldn't be a shouting match in my parents' living room. It would be a carefully orchestrated event, a final performance where Jenna would be the unwilling star and her downfall would be the main event. I picked up the phone and called my mother. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice sweet and calm. "I was thinking, why don't we have a big family dinner this Sunday? I'll even cook. There's something I'd like to talk about with everyone." The air in my parents' house that Sunday was thick with forced pleasantries. I had arrived early, the picture of the dutiful daughter, a perfectly roasted chicken in my hands. The aroma filled the kitchen, a homey scent that was completely at odds with the cold knot of dread and anticipation in my stomach. My parents, Mark and Helen, W. Air relieved to see me smiling, interpreting my offer to cook as a sign that I was finally moving on. They were blissfully unaware that they were about to be the audience for the final act of a tragedy. Jenna arrived last, fashionably late, of course. She swept in wearing a cream-colored dress that I instantly recognized. It was mine. It was a designer piece I had bought for a wedding years ago, one I had discovered was missing during my secret inventory. Seeing it on her, styled with a trendy belt and worn with such casual ownership, sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. It was the final confirmation I needed that this had to be done, publicly and brutally. "Lori, you cooked. It smells amazing," she chirped, giving me a kiss on the cheek that felt like a snake's bite. "And I love this old dress on you. See, I told you decluttering would be good for you. You're finding all your hidden gems." The audacity of her comment almost made me laugh. She was complimenting me on a dress she had stolen and was currently wearing a different stolen dress right in front of me. She truly believed she was untouchable. We sat down at the dining table, the same table where we'd had thousands of family meals. My dad carved the chicken, my mom passed around the mashed potatoes. The conversation was painfully normal. My dad talked about a documentary he had watched. My mom fretted about her garden. Jenna talked, at length, about the incredible opportunity that had come her way. "This amazing fashion incubator, the Vanguard Collective, they found my shop online," she announced, beaming. "They invited me to apply for this huge grant. It's for emerging talent. Tiffany Styles even shouted me out to her followers." My parents ate it up. "Oh, Jenna, that's wonderful," my mom exclaimed. "We are so proud of you," my dad added, his face glowing. I let her talk, letting her dig her own grave deeper with every boastful word. I just nodded and smiled, a silent observer at my own execution, or so she thought. Finally, as my mom was clearing the plates for dessert, I decided it was time. "That's amazing news, Jenna," I said, my voice calm and even. "It sounds like a really professional organization. I'm sure their application process was very thorough." "Oh, it was," Jenna said, puffing up with self-importance. "I had to submit a full business plan, my brand philosophy, and a complete inventory of my current stock with sourcing details. They're very serious about authenticity." "Sourcing details?" I asked, feigning innocent curiosity. "Like where you get all your beautiful vintage pieces?" "Exactly," she said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "You have to prove you have a good eye that you can find treasures. Like, I have this amazing leather jacket I found at an estate sale in the Hamptons. The story is half the value, you know?" This was my moment. I took a deep breath. "That's fascinating," I said, my voice dropping slightly, losing its gentle edge. "Because that sounds a lot like the leather jacket I bought in Milan on my 5th wedding anniversary, the one that's now missing from my boxes upstairs." The clatter of a fork dropping onto a plate broke the silence. Jenna's smile froze on her face. My parents looked back and forth between us, confusion dawning on their faces. "What are you talking about, Lori?" Jenna laughed, a high, nervous sound. "Don't be ridiculous." I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim portfolio. I placed it in the center of the table. "I'm talking about this," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. I opened it to the first page. It was a high-resolution screenshot of the Chloe's Closet storefront. "This is your shop, isn't it, Jenna? On the Gem Collective app?" Jenna stared at it, her face paling. I don't know what that is." "Really?" "Because here's a copy of your application to the Vanguard Collective, which, by the way, doesn't exist. I created it." I flipped the page. "An application submitted from your email address with your full name and address claiming ownership of this shop." My mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My dad just stared, his expression unreadable. I turned the page again. It was a side-by-side comparison. On the left was a photo of me wearing my Grey Tance Art Deco earrings at a family event. On the right was the screenshot of the sold listing from Chloe's Closet, titled Gatsby-era crystal fan earrings. "These look familiar, don't they?" I continued, my voice relentless. I flipped through the pages, a sickening slideshow of my life being sold off piece by piece. The sapphire ring, the cashmere sweater, the signed book. Each one accompanied by a photo of me with the item, juxtaposed with her sales listing and the price she got for it. Then, I got to the final page. It was a picture of our grandmother, smiling, the gold locket gleaming at her throat. Next to it was the screenshot of the listing, exquisite gold-filled vintage locket, sold for $250. "Jen." No was white as a sheet, her eyes wide with panic. You're crazy," she stammered, looking at our parents for support. "She's making this up, she's just upset about the divorce and taking it out on me." But my parents weren't looking at her with sympathy anymore. They were looking at her with a dawning horror. The proof was undeniable, laid out in black and white on their dining room table. "I'm not finished," I said. I pulled out the last two pieces of evidence. The first was the consignment shop receipt I had found in the box, showing the sale of my sweater and jeans. The second was a printout of the inventory spreadsheet she had so helpfully sent me, the one where she had detailed her lies about sourcing. "You didn't just steal from me, Jenna," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I could no longer contain. "You stole our grandmother's memory. You stole pieces of our family's history and sold them to strangers for pocket change. You saw me at my absolute lowest point, and you decided to profit from it." Tears were streaming down her face now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of humiliation. She had been caught. "So," I said, leaning back in my chair, the final move in a chess game she never knew she was playing. "Here's what's going to happen. You are going to liquidate whatever is left in that shop and give me every single dollar. You will also pay me back the value of every item you've already sold, which, according to my calculations, comes to $4,750. I slid the spreadsheet I'd made with Sarah across the table. "Or, I will take this portfolio, along with your signed confession, to the police and press charges for felony theft. I will also send it to every single person you know, including your boss and all those influencers you admire so much. Your choice." The room was utterly silent, save for Jenna's choked sobs. My parents just sat there, stunned into immobility. The rebellion was over. The kingdom had fallen. And I was the one left holding the crown. The aftermath was not a fiery explosion, but a slow, suffocating implosion. Jenna, stripped of her lies and bravado, completely crumbled. She sat at the dining table, sobbing hysterically, unable to form a coherent sentence. It wasn't the sound of remorse, it was the wail of a narcissist whose carefully constructed world had been shattered. My parents, Mark and Helen, were ghosts at their own table. My mother's face was a mask of disbelief and profound sorrow. My father, the retired teacher who had always believed in clear-cut rights and wrongs, looked older than I had ever seen him, the disappointment etched so deeply into his features it seemed to physically weigh him down. There were no more excuses for them to make, no more room for doubt. The evidence was absolute. I didn't stick around for the fallout. I had said my piece. I stood up from the table, collected my portfolio, and walked out the door without a backward glance. The silence that followed me out of that house was more damning than any shouting match could ever have been. It was the sound of a family breaking. The money appeared in my bank account 2 days later. The full amount, $4,750, transferred with no message attached. Jenna had chosen the path of least resistance, the one that kept the police and her social circle out of it. It wasn't about the money for me, not really. It was about the admission of guilt. Every dollar was a confirmation of what she had done. A few days after that, a single, plain cardboard box appeared outside my apartment door. Inside were the few remaining items from her inventory: my leather jacket, the vintage boots, and a few other pieces of clothing. They were neatly folded. There was no note. I haven't spoken to Jenna since that dinner. I've heard through Sarah, who heard through a cousin, that she quit her job at the boutique and has completely scrubbed her social media presence. The Chloe's Closet empire is gone, vanished as if it never existed. She is, for all intents and purposes, in exile. My relationship with my parents is the most complicated casualty. They called me the day after the dinner, their voices tired and heavy. They apologized profusely, not just for Jenna's actions, but for their own blindness for not believing me. "We're so sorry, Lori," my mom had cried softly into the phone. "We should have listened to you. We should have trusted you." I accepted their apology, but it couldn't erase the weeks of being gaslighted, of having my own sanity questioned. A crack has formed in our foundation, and I don't know if it will ever fully heal. Our Sunday dinners are a thing of the past. We see each other now in short, cautious bursts, the elephant of their other daughter's betrayal always sitting in the room with us. One of the most surreal moments came about a month later. I received a package in the mail. Inside was a small velvet pouch. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was my grandmother's locket. The young Woma. N from the bus had found me. Tucked inside the package was a note written in neat, cursive handwriting. "I think this belongs to you," it read. "My name is Emily. After our conversation in the coffee shop, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. I did some digging into the cellar and saw some very strange activity before she closed her shop. I felt in my gut that your story was true. It took me a while to track you down through a mutual acquaintance on social media, but I knew I had to return this to its rightful owner. I hope it brings you peace." I sat on my sofa, holding the locket in my palm, and I cried. I cried for the first time since this whole ordeal began. Not tears of rage or sadness, but tears of overwhelming relief. A complete stranger had shown me more compassion and belief than my own sister. Emily's act of kindness was a reminder that while there is darkness and betrayal in the world, there is also inherent goodness in people. I sent her a thank you card with a check for the $250 she had spent, which she refused to cash. We've since met for coffee, and a tentative friendship is blooming. I've moved the rest of my things out of my parents' house and into a small, secure storage unit. Going through those boxes is a slow and sometimes painful process, but it's also a process of reclaiming myself. I've sold some of the things, the right way, with honesty. The money is going into a fund I've labeled Future. I don't know what that future holds, but for the first time since the divorce, it feels like it's mine to design. The silence from my sister is a silence worth more than gold. It's the quiet that comes after a storm, the peace that comes with justice. I lost a sister, but I found my own strength.